There's a part of our brain built to hold us back. There's a part of our mind designed to keep us from growing. Concentration is the single most important skill you can develop. It's a skill that matters more than any other skill, and is a skill that is key to developing any other skill. It's so easy for the brain to pull us into these kind of distractions because all we have to do is flip on the remote or pick up our phone or put on our headphones, and bam, we've fallen into a distraction and the trap of resistance that keeps us from doing what it is that we want to do. Don't ask why, ask how. Don't ask, why do I have such bad concentration? Ask, how can I improve my concentration? What took me nearly 15 years to develop as a skill, this thing was doing in minutes. Wanting doesn't equate to having. All it is that we have a part of our brain that's designed to hold us back and protect us.
Life flows like an endless ocean of stories. We often miss these precious tales as we rush through our days, too consumed by daily struggles to notice the poetry swirling around us. Yet within these stories lie the keys to our past, sparks for our creativity, and fresh winds to fill our sails. I am Obro, a writer based in Melbourne, in quest of those stories with diverse voices that tell them from every corner of the world. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. Hi Cam, and welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
I am looking forward to our conversation today. And in this section, I speak to a writer and try to understand about what they're working on and how they started writing and what they have published, etc. So, for our audience, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Cam Knight, and I'm an international speaker and author of a dozen books in the area of mental performance, such as speed reading, memory, and concentration, as well as personal mastery, such as self-talk, visualization, and goal setting. I will say the reason I got into writing is because at a certain point in my life, I had an itch to write. It was an overpowering itch. I couldn't resist it. And I don't know where this itch came from because I was never a writer. I didn't enjoy writing. And to be frankly honest, I sucked at writing. I was terrible in English and language arts and all of those classes that I grew up taking, and was really more of a science, math, and analytical person. But it was an overpowering itch I had that I couldn't resist, so I started writing. And I'll be honest, in the beginning, I sucked at writing because I didn't have a lot of focus when I was younger. A lot of the stuff that I learned in school about language and words and grammar and spelling, I never really picked up. And so when I started writing, I was, let's just say, behind the curve. And it took me a little bit more time and effort to just get to a good baseline. But I kept at it and I got better. And here I am talking to you.
That is amazing. And I can relate to your story because I trained as an engineer and I always wanted to write poetry. And whenever I
Yeah.
was trying to write something creative, in the education system, what I found is that I was told, oh, you have to write in certain ways. Otherwise, it's not creative writing. I was feeling that where does that come from? And it took me a long time to find my style. But now I am a published writer and I wanted to create this space where I can connect with other writers, know about their story and their motivation. First of all, I found something very interesting from your Facebook post, which connected us and led us to this episode. You said you have a very
Sure.
unique concept to talk about. Can I please hear about that?
Oh, yeah. So it's a concept I call internal resistance. So for as far back as I can remember, I've been a fairly driven individual. It's hard not to be living in a culture or society with so much personal development content and everyone telling you to do more, be yourself, best self, and reach for the stars. As a result, I've always wanted to do more, have more, and accomplish more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, I always felt like I fell short or missed the mark, or the success was much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. And I know a lot of writers resonate with this because they want to get started writing, but they're not. Or they have started writing, but they just keep procrastinating on getting it done. Or they're right at the cusp of finishing it, but they don't finish it. And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the brain. And over time, I began to realize that, hey, wait a minute, there's a part of our brain built to hold us back. There's a part of our mind designed to keep us from growing. And it's crazy that to think that our own brain or our mechanism in our brain or our unconscious is actually actively working to hold us back, and it is. And I call this part resistance. So resistance is a brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
That is very interesting concept, and I'm looking forward to exploring throughout the conversation. And in this section in stories and stanza, when I speak to the writers, I always request if they can read something they have written. It can be the blurb of the book, or it can be anything as like within the book, or anything they're working on. Can I request you to share something you have written?
Sure. So before I started developing the concept of resistance, I finished my the book that I put my most heart and soul, like it was my biggest passion project, and it took me over 2 years of writing day and night to complete. And it's my book called Concentration, Maintain Laser Sharp Focus and Attention for 5 hours or more. And at the end of this book, I have this excerpt that helps people realize why concentration is just so important. And I'll read that. And so, why concentration? Every few years, a new self help expert claims to have the key to success, achievement, and growth. One claims that it's motivation, another claims that it's assertiveness, while some say it's mastering emotions. Most recently, a book came out asserting that the key trait of high performers is grit. Personally, I don't think it's any of these. I believe concentration is the most important skill anyone can develop. That's because without concentration, you can't do anything else. You can't read a book, listen to a conversation, understand a lecture, or stick with a task. The skill is essential for decision making, evaluating options, solving problems, staying on time, driving safely, and operating dangerous machinery. As as stated in the intro, concentration is also important to relationships because if you can't pay attention to people, those interactions can go only so far. Even traits such as motivation, assertiveness, and grit require concentration to develop, refine, and apply. So, concentration is a big driver to everything you do and affects every area of your life. Kurt Vonnegut Jr., American novelist, said the secret to success in any human endeavor is total concentration. Jack Nicklaus, regarded as the greatest golfer of all time, said, my ability to concentrate has been my greatest asset. Michael Faraday, the most influential scientist to our daily life, listed concentration as one of the 5 essential entrepreneurial skills for success. Sylvia Porter, one of the most successful writers in America, said, I have learned ruthless concentration. I can write under any circumstances, street noises, loud talk, music, you name it. Lee Iacocca, automobile executive known for developing the Ford Mustang and reviving the Chrysler Corporation, said, the ability to concentrate is everything. As you can see, concentration is a big deal. It's a bigger deal than you can imagine. In fact, it's bigger than even that. Concentration is a single most important skill you can develop. It's a skill that matters more than any other skill, and is a skill that is key to developing any other skill. There's so much coming at us, there's so much distractions, and unfortunately, there's a lot of media that we are consuming and is available to us, whether it's television, commercials, social media, YouTube, internet. And what's interesting is that a lot of these formats of entertainment have things, what's happening is that they have a lot of what's called pattern interrupts. So the screen changes quite rapidly. There's all sorts of tickers and symbols and icons and emojis flashing. And all of that trains our brain to hold attention for shorter and shorter periods. Because once the brain gets used to a screen changing or something new happening every few seconds or even less than a second, then it trains our brain to only hold attention for just a few seconds. And I really believe that's like a core issue when it comes to the attention problems in our society right now, is that we're just consuming not just too much media, but media with so much activity that we become used to or habituated to that. So when we don't have that, it's difficult to pay attention.
And often we get sucked into these sort of avenues, whether it is some kind of media or it is some kind of entertainment, and we are so used to that. If it is
Yeah.
not there, we feel there something is missing. We are not fully present in that moment.
It's crazy. I can't tell you how many times I travel a lot, so I might stay in an Airbnb with other guests or meet people, and how much people have this need to have media on. So even if they're not watching the television or listening to the radio, they need to have something on because they're just so habituated to have some sort of visual stuff going on or auditory thing in the background. And it's gotten pretty bad. Like there'll be times where I'm just like sitting in a maybe in a living room or in a public place, and I'm trying to enjoy the quietness of it, or just trying to get some work done, and somebody will come and turn on the television or turn on their laptop and have the movie going, even though they're not watching. I remember I was at the airport several years ago waiting for a flight. Connecting flight had come where a lot of people came off and were sitting around me. And there was this one college girl, she came and sat right next to me, and immediately she opened up her laptop and had the show on going. And then she had something going on in her phone, and she wasn't even really paying attention to either because she was talking to her friends, next to her. And I was just like, I was getting distracted. I'm like, do you really need to have that on? You're not even watching it. You really need to have what's going on your phone, even though you're just trying to converse with the person next to you. I didn't obviously say it to her, but that's what I was thinking. And most recently, just a few weeks ago, I was staying at an Airbnb, and one of the guests out of nowhere was just blasting the TV. And so I went downstairs and I told them, I'm like, hey, I have a podcast in a few hours. Would you mind? Like, I don't mind you blasting it. It's okay. But just at 11 o'clock, can you just lower it just for an hour? And he got a little defensive or quite defensive, saying it's not even that loud and things like that. I'm like, well, my room is like right up there, so I can hear it. And he went as far as to come up to my room to see if it was that loud. And I thought once he came in my room and heard the sound, he'd be like, oh, yeah, man, I'll definitely turn it down. He's like, I don't hear anything. I'm like, are you serious? Like, you can totally hear it. And he's like, I mean, it's a little bit. And what that tells me is that that guy watches so much television and watches it so loud that I think he doesn't understand what loud is anymore. Like to him, what would be outside of the norm is less than normal. So he really has to crank things up. And get this. So we kind of had a little confrontation about it, and I'm just like, whatever. But he did end up lowering the volume at 11 o'clock. And sure enough, at 12 o'clock, he raised the volume right back up. I went downstairs to grab lunch, and he has a TV blasting while he's watching another show on his phone. Like, it's just, people have become really not, I don't want to say dependent, but almost addicted to media. And, I teach a concept called internal resistance. And with internal resistance, what I say is that a part of our brain is designed to hold us back and is actively working to hold us back. But when it holds us back, it doesn't tell us. It doesn't say, hey, this thing that you're trying to do, I can't let you do it. Instead, it uses manipulative tricks. So it has all sorts of tricks up its sleeve to keep us from doing what it is that we're trying to do. And one of those tricks is to get us hooked on distractions. And one of the biggest distractions and the easiest distractions in our lives right now is media, because media is one of those things where we can gain a lot of engagement and positive feelings without doing anything. In fact, without lifting a single finger. All we have to do is watch a screen, and through the various imagery and the shows and the acting and the drama and the music, we can gain a lot of, I guess, positive feelings and even an experience without, like I said, lifting a single finger or even getting up off the couch. So it's a very easy way to pass the time. And because it's so easy, and when our brain wants to stop us from doing something, it's so easy for the brain to pull us into these kind of distractions, because all we have to do is flip on the remote, or, pick up our phone or put on our headphones, and bam, we've fallen into a distraction and the trap of resistance that keeps us from doing what it is that we want to do.
It is very true, very real, and very alarming in today's day and age. And I feel sometimes like this over dependence on technology, taking some of our basic skills away. I had a very interesting conversation with my daughter about reading maps. That's
Right.
a skill, something we had maybe 20 years ago. Now we don't so much as bother about it because there's always GPS, there's always this map and that map. And I was trying to tell
Yeah.
her, what if you get lost or somewhere you are not getting the signal? How do you read the map and come back to somewhere you're starting? And I think it has something to do with the concentration. You're spot on that these are some of the very alarming sides. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you see as the necessary skills to improve that? Would you say that it is through meditation or mindfulness practice, or would there be something else that you would recommend in such scenarios?
So as I mentioned, concentration is one of the most important skills that we can develop. And there isn't any easy or quick solution when it comes to concentration. And I find the people who struggle are kind of looking for that. What's more is that unfortunately, there aren't a lot of good information on improving concentration. Majority of the information out there is pretty much turn off distractions and use the Pomodoro technique and some simple things that don't really address the issue. And so if we want a solution, we have to understand what concentration is and how it works. And so what I want to tell people is that the reason concentration is so difficult is that we have a lot of activity inside of our mind and body. We have thoughts running in and out. We have mental images flashing back and forth in the way of daydreams and mental movies. And then we have all sorts of emotions and feelings coursing through us. Emotions like fear and anxiety and worry, as well as sensations like pains and aches and clenching. And all of that competes with our awareness for attention. And so when we have a lot of this stuff, it becomes difficult to focus. And the people who have more challenges with concentration tend to have a lot more inner activity. So their mind tends to race with a lot of thoughts. And so if they have a lot of thoughts in their head, it's hard for them to focus on anything outside of their head. And a lot of times a lot of people fall into daydreaming. So they want to study, they want to focus, but they can't because their mind is just one giant mental movie after another, going from one daydreams to another. And then other people have just a lot of emotions. Either they can be pretty sensitive to things, and so they get triggered a lot easier, or they just tend to have a lot of like emotions and sensations going through their body. And what's even more is some people have all of that. You know, they have racing thoughts, they're in a constant daydream, and they have so much like physical activity going on that trying to focus on something outside of that becomes very challenging. And in fact, I am one of those people who had all that, which is why I talk about concentration the way I do. I have to go through this challenging experience to understand what it is. And so when it comes to concentration, we want to work on those things. We want to work on toning a lot of those things down. And so it really depends what a person is experiencing. If a person does have a monkey mind where they have a lot of thoughts running, then meditative techniques can be a good solution. And I feel like there's two main kinds of meditations. One is where you try to hold a certain thought or you try to repeat a certain mantra, or the other is where you try to clear your mind of your thoughts. And I think somebody who has an overactive mind running with thoughts all the time, it helps to do meditative practices where you're trying to clear the thoughts from your head. The more you can clear them, the more you can focus, and the more you break the pattern of the thoughts running. Now, if someone is in a lot of mental movies and daydreams, then it really helps to be able to develop the skill of taking control over the mental images that come into your head. And so I teach people different exercises that help people to control the images that come up. So instead of just being swept away like a carpet ride, they can actually create various images and hold on to them. And the more they do that, the more they have control over what's going on. And then with other stuff, we have different techniques as well. And so if I were to break down concentration, one is you want to use exercises that over time develop your concentration. And then at the same time, you want to use in the moment tools that help you get focused right away. And as far as the exercises, I kind of mentioned a couple of them. One is to use a meditative practice where you try to clear as much thoughts as possible. And when a thought enters, don't beat yourself up, just try to clear it. And when another one enters, same thing. With the visual, if somebody who has a lot of daydreaming going on, it helps to create images of various shapes and like say like close your eyes and create an image of a shape like a triangle and just hold on to that image for as long as possible. And as other images try to come in, put them to the side and keep focusing on the image that you were initially holding. And of course, you're going to lose that image, but if you do, just try to bring yourself back. When we're dealing with emotions, it's really paying attention to the emotions because our emotions aren't there to make our lives difficult, but they're there to help us move through life. They're there to warn and guide us. But we haven't been taught to pay attention to our emotions. And when we don't pay attention, they get louder and stronger. And the louder and stronger they get, the more we try to avoid them, and they just get even louder and stronger. And we can stop this cycle just by like paying attention to our emotions more. So if we have a lot of we're getting really riled up, it helps to just close your eyes and look at what the emotions are, what they're trying to communicate. And it sounds crazy, but some of our biggest challenges and issues in life, things we've struggled with for years, can go away like that if you just start paying attention to them. Because, like I said, all the emotions ever wanted was for them to be heard. So these are the exercises I teach. But then there's a lot of in the moment tools. Some are the simple, basic stuff that you've already heard, like setting a goal or, things like that. But there's one thing that people likely haven't heard, and I call it directed questions. More or less, the principle behind directed questions is that there's a mechanism on our brain that's designed to seek answers anytime a question is asked. So anytime a question is heard by the brain, whether it's asked by you or someone else, it triggers this mechanism to begin thinking of answers and bringing them into your awareness. Now, what's interesting is that it doesn't matter what the question is. All that matters is that the question is asked. So a person can ask two opposing questions, and the brain will seek answers for both. For example, one may ask, or a great example would be, let's say I ask, why are kids so adorable? And the answers the brain might come up with is because they're young, they're innocent, they're full of energy and joy. But if I ask an opposing question, which is, why are kids so annoying? The brain is just going to come up with answers that are in line with that. They're loud, they're messy, they're out of control. And so we can use this feature of our brain to help us focus. And in fact, many people are doing that, but they're doing it in the wrong way. They'll ask questions like, why can't I focus? Why can't I pay attention? Why is my concentration so bad? And so the answers that come up are going to reinforce that. But if we can flip the question to how can I focus? How can I pay attention to this assignment for the next 20 minutes? How can I get all my work done in the next 2 hours? The brain is going to start thinking of answers on how to do that. And what's interesting is our questions signal to the brain of the outcome that we want. So when we're asking, why do I have a bad concentration? Our brain kind of leads us into having poor focus. But when we start asking, how can I focus on this task? How can I spend the next hour to get these things done? Not only will the brain give you answers, but it'll automatically engage you in the answers. So if one of the answers comes up is turn off your phone and sit down and start writing or get to work, you'll find that magically you'll just sit down, turn off your phone and start writing. If another answer comes up that will help you with the question that you ask, you'll find yourself naturally doing it. Now, this is an in the moment tool, so it's not a long-term solution. So sometimes the effects last, a good half hour to an hour, and sometimes it can last even shorter depending on the level of a person's concentration. But it doesn't really matter because once you lose your focus, you just ask the question again. Hey, I was doing really great. How can I continue focusing on this assignment? Or, I was making good progress, but I fell off. So how can I spend the next 30 minutes making sure I finish this project? Things like that. So if we can get into a pattern of just like asking ourselves questions that direct us in the direction that we want, it is it is much more constructive than asking questions such as why. So long story short, don't ask why, ask how. Don't ask, why do I have such bad concentration? Ask, how can I improve my concentration?
That is very deep and thoughtful and insightful, both the longer term techniques and in the moment techniques. I'll have to make
Yeah.
a note of this.
Yeah, I know I kind of went on a rant, but like I said, when you're dealing with concentration, you have to go deeper. So I tried to give some deeper answers that could
Mm,
be valuable for people.
definitely. And you mentioned that you have written 12 books. I will link all the information in our episode
Sure.
description. So, the concept that we are talking about, have you written anything specific focused to that?
The internal resistance? Not so much. So
Mhm.
after my concentration book, I told myself I wouldn't write for a little bit just because writing is a big endeavor. It takes months to years to write a book. And this is prior to ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, where now you can write books very quickly. Most all of my books were written prior to these tools coming out. So I spent a good part of my adult life just writing. And like I said, my concentration book, I spent nearly 2 years writing nearly from morning to night. And I really didn't do anything outside of writing. When I was on the bus, I was writing. When I was waiting in line, I was writing. When I was in between meetings, I was writing. I was just writing all the time to produce the content I did for the books that I had written. So I told myself I wouldn't write, but then this concept of internal resistance started just coming to me. It wasn't something that I was forcing or wanting to put together, but given all the work I had done personally and the books that I had written and through my travels, the things I had learned, it started coming to me. And so I put together a course called Conquer Internal Resistance, which people can learn about at camknight.com, my website. And so I didn't actually write a book about it, but you know, it's such a deep topic, and the more I talk about it, the more that comes up, that it is probably something worth putting into a book.
Absolutely. I'm sure someone in need would be benefited by this part. In terms of your writing journey, we talked about some very interesting areas. You encountered some challenges, some mental blocks while writing, and how did you overcome them to make the books happen?
Yeah, I encountered a lot of challenges, especially in the beginning. As I mentioned, because as a child, I didn't really pay attention to a lot of my language arts and English classes. I didn't really understand the mechanics of writing. And because I'm actually a first generation, I English isn't even my native language. So those things were already working against me. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome. So as I was writing, I just had a lot of fear of people thinking, well, who is this guy to write? What credentials does he have? Standard things that a lot of us writers go through. Though one of the biggest challenges I had, especially in the beginning, was the perfectionism. In the beginning, literally, I kid you not, I was spending maybe an hour at least per paragraph. And not only that, but a lot of times, when the book got closer to getting finished, I had put so much time in writing certain excerpts and paragraphs that didn't even get used. So I ended up spending tons of time on it. And because I was spending so much time, I felt the need to use and integrate everything I had written. And so my books didn't flow well. It tended to be wordy and it wasn't as clear and concise as it could have been. But I realized I kind of came across this trick by accident, and it really helped that self-publishing made it easy to update books. But when we're when we finish a book in the beginning, we're so close to it that it's hard to make changes, and it's hard to see the wordiness and the complicatedness that we put into it. But if we can if we can come back to it after a year or two later, a lot of our like connection to it has kind of gone away. So it's much easier to come in with a more what's the word? Objective mind. And so what I do regularly is revisit the books I have written about a year or two later, sometimes 5 years later. And I could be like, what was I thinking? Why did I put this? It doesn't make sense. Or I already said this earlier, so no need to say it again. And doing that has really helped people to enjoy and engage with my material because now it's just like much more clear, much more succinct. It gets to the point, and it's hard to do that when we're really close to it. But when we can get some time in between, it helps us kind of remove ourselves from it for long enough to look at our work more objectively and from a perspective that could help a reader outside of yourself actually enjoy it. Though it can go overboard, it's easy to kind of always revisit it and try to keep improving it and improving it and improving it. And I fall into that challenge as well. In fact, there's a part of me that kind of likes to just go over my stuff and edit and re-edit things. It's like I don't know, it's almost therapeutic or meditative for me. But of course, that takes a lot of time and it spends a lot of uh, it takes in a lot of effort and things like that. So yeah, I did experience a lot of challenges. And just to summarize, first I had the challenge of not really having a strong command of the English language. Two, being a first generation, English being my first language, it made it challenging to really kind of be to write. Three, I had a lot of perfectionism, and combined with imposter syndrome, made me want to spend a lot of time in putting in effort hours into paragraphs that I didn't really need to. And then, of course, once you publish the book, there's that, okay, well, I don't want to market it now. What if people don't like it? And I had challenges with receiving criticism and feedback. And in fact, in the beginning, it was like hard for me to look at the reviews of my books on Amazon. Like I would cringe at doing that. But the more I did it, the more I got comfortable. It's like, okay, positive review, great. If negative, okay, how could I have improved it? So yeah, those were some of the challenges.
Wonderful. I did another episode on this perfectionism and imposter syndrome just a couple of days back, so I can totally relate to what you are saying. And as your next steps as a writer, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I don't know, with artificial intelligence evolving as much as it is, I haven't really been as motivated to write, let's just say, because, once ChatGPT came out, I actually had an existential crisis. And I remember the moment very vividly. It was New Year's of 2003, and somebody I knew sent me a video that Alex Ramosi had done about ChatGPT. So at that point, ChatGPT had been out for only a month, and I just heard about it on New Year's. And I freaked out. I had an existential crisis. What took me nearly 15 years to develop as a skill, this thing was doing in minutes. Now, granted, at the time, the writing wasn't as good as mine. I was still able to write better, and I didn't really enjoy using ChatGPT because it was just easier for me to get the kind of thoughts that I wanted to get out. But I just saw that you know, thing with writing becoming almost effortless, that the market was going to get saturated. It was kind of like blogs. Blogs were huge back in the early 2000s, but now there's so many blogs. And I thought that would be the same with books. And I feel like it is going in that direction. I think I heard something like Amazon publishes, 4 to 7,000 new books a day. And that's just going to accelerate because now it's becoming easier and easier. And there's so many AI tools to literally help people write books in a few days or a few hours. And although I have a lot of novel thoughts and ideas that ChatGPT won't be able to write about just because it hasn't been fed the data to do it, I'm just hesitant to put in, the amount of time that it normally takes me to write a book, which can be months to years, when all these people are just pumping out books in days and weeks. And unfortunately, I haven't written since ChatGPT, and I don't know if I will continue. I think I'm likely going to pivot into something that I feel might be a little bit more sustainable. Though it's hard to know the direction that artificial intelligence is going because it seems like it's gonna eventually reach everyone. So, long story short, I haven't written since New Year's of 2022, and I'm not quite sure if I will. I have a couple more books in me, but we'll see.
Thank you so much for joining us on Stories and Stanza and share your wisdom, your books, and your ideas. I really, really love them. And I'm sure that the audience will be able to connect to these and they should be able to find the right level of details if they want to get into your course and know about the books, etc. Before we close, is there anything else you would like to say to the audience?
Yeah, I'll just say one last thing, and I tend to close with this with a few different shows that I've done, and it relates to the topic of internal resistance. And I just want to let people know that wanting doesn't equate to having. Just because you want something doesn't mean you'll take the necessary steps to get it. And that's because we have a part of our brain that's designed to hold us back and is actively working to hold us back. And I don't want people to think just because they have a want and a desire or burning desire that it'll automatically lead to us acting on it and achieving it. As many people have experienced, that's never the case. But when we can't achieve what we want, it's easy to feel bad. It's easy to feel like there's something wrong with us, that we're lazy, that we don't have what it takes. But it's not any of that. All it is that we have a part of our brain that's kind of designed to hold us back and protect us. And there's very deep psychological reasons why it does. Some are kind of obvious, but in my exploration of the topic, I found that it really goes quite deep. And to if they are stuck, to not use those excuses of because I'm lazy, but to go deeper and to really understand what's holding you back. Because when you can work on the resistance, it becomes much easier to do things. And if a person has been sitting or waiting on that book, waiting to finish it or waiting to start on it, it's likely resistance holding them back. But once they work through it, it just becomes easy. Then they can do it like it was no problem.
Thank you once again, Cam, for
You're
joining
welcome.
Stories and Stanza today.